know the numbers coming out of China. We can't trust what Chinese GDP is. It's not like the United States. It's not like some other countries. They largely have the ability to make them up. I mean, if there's a 7-point swing, Gordon, as you suggested, they're making them up. So we look to secondary indicators, right? You talked about electricity. Matt talked about purchasing managers. Fascinating statistic regarding gambling, what insight that might give us. But wouldn't it, regardless of the numbers, it fits something that would make sense, right? China is an export-driven economy and always has been. In other words, they're dependent upon the outside world's orders of goods being made in China. And one thing we know for sure is the outside world has been suffering for a good 3 or 4 years. Whether or not that's Europe or the United States, it would just make sense that China is undergoing a big contraction. Is that wrong?
I want to get Gordon's view on this. Let me just give you a number real quick, Gordon, before we get your view on that. The EU is China's largest trading partner. So what goes on in the EU directly affects China.
Right.
So let's take a look here. In July alone, exports fell to the EU by 16.6%. Right. I mean, that has to have a direct effect on the Chinese economy. And as you said, the numbers come out and still show them above 7.5% growth when their exports are the largest basic partner are falling almost 17%.
You know, in July, Chinese exports increased only by 1.0%. Even worse, imports, which really show the health of the domestic economy, increased by only 4.7%. Those numbers are well below everybody's expectations. They show that very important sector of the Chinese economy is really ailing. And you look at some of the other things that you talk about, all of this excess production, technically it's gross domestic product, but it's useless. And what it means is that in the future, China cannot be making more dolls and all this stuff, steel, because they've already got too much of it. And that really limits their ability to deal with the coming downturn.
What is the major if it is a major slowdown, which it seems like both you guys agree that this is a serious slowdown, that they're manipulating the numbers like they manipulate their currency, what does it mean for the U.S.? What happens now for us? Assuming that this plays out, assuming the slowdown continues, they don't have an easy way out of it, how does it affect us across the ocean?
Well, it affects everybody around the world. But, you know, China is not the global engine of prosperity as everyone makes it out to be. Because to be an engine, you got to buy other countries' products. And that means you got to run big trade deficits. Well, China runs surpluses because it has predatory policies. And so essentially, China is not the engine of global growth. The U.S. still is, because we're still buying all this stuff from everybody else. So it really also means that the Chinese economy is much more tied to us than we are tied to them. Last year, China's surplus against the United States was 190.5% of its overall surplus. That's an incredible number. And that number will go up for the reason you mentioned, because exports to Europe are going down for China, means exports to the U.S. are going up. And that means that that 190.5% figure, as big as it is, I mean, it's just inconceivable, could easily go up.
What's the flip side, though? If the growth at all cost strategy now is no longer a strategy, they can't keep that up, what happens inside China? Are the Chinese politicians going to start saying, well, they're going to point fingers at each other? Could we have unrest? I mean, where do you see this going? I think this is in your book, if I recall.
Well, you got a lot of problems because you have this historic transition as the fourth generation leaders give way to the fifth. That's supposed to start at the end of this year. They're always fighting over something. Now they're fighting over more things because you have the turnover of leadership and the ailing economy. You know, an economy that is about zero gives them one more thing to fight over. It means the political system will continue to fracture. You know, we've seen so many unanticipated events from China this year, and an economy at zero is another one that is really going to drive the nail in the coffin.
So, Gordon, I have a question. When you look at this relationship, this trade relationship between the West and China, who's really the victim here of slowdown? I mean, if the West demand for Chinese products and goods are going down, and China has warehouses full of products that they can't sell, couldn't they be blaming the West for their economic malaise?
They blame the West for everything. Even in good times, they blame the United States. So right now, you're starting to see things from People's Daily, which is the Communist Party's mouthpiece. You know, it just unrelenting crap against us. And that's going to continue. It's going to get worse. And it's not just the economy. It's not just politics. It's because of the problems in China. You have the military breaking free of civilian control in a very, very sensitive time. So that's why we have all these problems in the South China Sea, East China Sea with Japan, these protests. It is a really very dangerous situation right now because the Chinese economy is tumbling and the leaders don't know what to do about it.
So now that it's tumbling, there's a stat that came out. I'd like to pull up the full screen of this showing visas. In 2006, 62 visas were issued. 2011, 2,408. The rich are leaving China. Is that because they see potential unrest coming in coming years, that they're saying, listen, I'm taking my money, I've made my millions, I'm now getting out of China?
Yeah, it's because they're worried about the money being taken away from them. They're also worried about the environment. and all a bunch of other things. And really what people are doing, and this is the most important indicator of a problem in society, is people leaving. In the second quarter of this year, probably capital flight was somewhere on the order of $110 billion. China's balance of payments for the first time in 14 years turned negative last quarter. You look at all of this. You talk about the money coming out to Macau. That is sort of corrupt money, which is being laundered in the casinos, which is the reason why Macau is so much bigger than Las Vegas. It's because it's a money laundering machine.
But can this be good? I mean, I'm trying to find something positive coming out of this segment. Is this good that money's leaving China? Maybe it will spread around the world and come to the U.S.? Could this be positive?
It'll come to the U.S. It's going to Canada, Vancouver. The real estate market, again, is taken off because of Chinese money. Australia, Hong Kong, it's just going around the world. So everybody is benefiting from this.